bugs!
Your firearms are useless against them!
They're everywhere. And with that sudden burst of heat that we had, unexpectedly, after a really nice, long, cool spring, they bloomed.
They certainly did. They came in here in droves and just hit everybody.
They did, and every one.
Yes.
Not just any one particular.
It's true.
We had beetles, we had leafhoppers, we had sharpshooters, we have aphids, we have thrips,
Yep.
we have whitefly, and the list goes on.
It really does.
But you don't need a huge arsenal.
No.
But most importantly, don't panic.
Right. You know, you have to learn to assess the damage.
Right.
And if it's minor damage and they're not affecting production of whatever you want, whether it's fruit or vegetables or flowers, or then, you know, at some point you kind of have to overlook minor things
Right.
and let nature take its course. Let the seasons take their course, and a lot of problems will resolve that way.
Right.
But we do put a lot of time and effort into our gardens, and we want to enjoy them. So when a problem gets serious, we have to intervene.
Well, let's kind of talk specifically about some of the ones that our customers
Right.
have been concerned about. And let's start with beetles, flea beetles. And like you were saying, there are many beetles, but we just kind of lump them into one group.
We do. It's like ladybugs. There's
Right.
a lot of different species of ladybugs. We just say ladybugs. Same thing with flea beetles. There's several different varieties, but we lump them into the same thing. And their feeding habits are the same.
Right.
And their controls are the same.
Right. And so the good news is they don't stay all
They
summer.
don't.
They're usually about, 6 weeks through
Yeah.
the area, and then they've moved on.
Right.
Which I've noticed lately, they have been less and less and less prevalent.
They do start drifting off. And I think maybe some of it has to do with the growth cycle of plants, that there's a stage of the growth cycle that is more delectable to them.
Right, right.
And once they've passed that, they move on from there.
So what would you say would be your go-to control? I know we've talked a lot about the beneficial nematodes.
Yes, and really there's a choice in this.
Right.
With some things like the grape flea beetles, something just as the horticultural soap, that will knock them out pretty much. And you need to make sure that you look where they're feeding and that you cover the leaves, and then hit the bottoms of the leaves too as well,
Right.
because they're going to run and hide there. And then there's DE, which is another thing, and you can dust DE.
Right.
And how DE works is it actually dehydrates. It slices little holes and dehydrates so it's really pretty much any beetle. That's one of the better controls for those hard-shelled creatures. And then they have part of their life cycle in the soil, and so
Right.
that's the reason for the beneficial nematodes. In fact, beneficial nematodes can really help with a lot of things that have that pupil or part of their life cycle in the soil.
Right. I want to jump back to DE for just a second.
Yeah.
Not to be confused, the agricultural DE with the DE that you put into your swimming pool filters.
Yes,
There is a difference.
a big difference.
Yes, there is.
And there are other things in the DE for pool filters, and so we want to avoid that like the plague.
Right.
Horticultural DE is labeled horticultural DE. Some of it is even labeled food grade DE.
Right.
And so it's safe to use in our gardens. It's a fine granular, so it does wash off easily when you're bringing produce in, for
Plus,
sure.
I believe the DE for the pool has been heat treated, so it's got a smoother edge
Right.
to it.
Yeah, which is not going to be as effective.
Exactly.
Yeah, we want that hard edge to be able to.
And while we're on the DE, sharpshooters and your leafhoppers have really been, now they're still here. The sharpshooters are a little long, more slender looking
Right.
bug, kind of a grayish in color.
Yes.
Where the leafhoppers are more triangular in
Right.
shape. And like you alluded to, they kind of
They
lean
stay
against.
flat, right.
But both are very cagey.
They
when you
are.
walk up, they'll zip around the
Yes.
stem or they'll flush.
Right.
But I find DE the best control for them as well.
Yeah, it really is. And you can pretty much tell, because the hoppers, when they're on a stem and you walk up, they'll actually scoot around to the
They
back of the
zip
stem.
around,
It's
yeah.
hilarious.
Yep, they're a lot of
You
fun.
can't see me.
I'm not here. So we talk about often Neem, and people
Right.
know Neem and like to use Neem a lot.
Yes.
But Neem in these temperatures,
They
you
don't
need
go
to be,
together.
no, they do not. So it's so
Yeah,
temperature sensitive.
It is. Anything over 85, and even on the very harsh, even during the wintertime, we have some very harsh sunlight days.
Right.
And you really shouldn't be using it then, even though the ambient temperature is low, because it can create phytotoxicity and do some damage. So neem is a tool in the organic toolbox, but it's not ever my first choice.
Right.
I will say, though, that there are some new studies showing neem being used as a soil drench, so as a systemic. And, organic gardeners don't have a lot of choices in systemics. And so mixing up, it's pretty easy, 2 quarts of water, 2 tablespoons of neem, and 2 teaspoons of a garden-safe soap, your horticultural soap or a Castile type soap.
Not Dawn.
Not detergents. They're not the same chemistry.
Right.
But that mixed up and then drenched around your plants, the roots absorb that, and then that neem is transferred through the vascular system of the plant. And it's not a toxin, so it's not a pesticide in that case. It's an anti-feedant.
Okay.
They stop feeding, and it also interrupts the maturity cycle of the insect. So when you're really desperate and you want to stay organic, or you have produce on a plant and you don't want to use anything, trying neem as a systemic is one of the things that we can now add to the toolbox.
So if you want to use an oil-based or horticultural oil type product, I really recommend the Monterey brand horticultural oil when the temps get a little bit higher, because it's a more finely emulsified mineral oil.
It is.
And I think a little safer to use in the evenings.
Right. Again, you need to kind of use it when the temperature is moderated.
Right. And suffocants are so good. They can't escape a suffocant.
That's right. They really can't. And the fact is that, again, make sure that you're spraying the top of the leaves just to the dripping point, not over that, and then turn that spray nozzle over and spray undersides of the leaves as well.
Well, another new, kind of fairly new kid on the block is this organicide.
Yeah.
Well, I especially love it, of course, because it's bee safe.
Right.
But it kind of ticks all the boxes here.
It really does. And, we do stick with the organics, and there are some things that are, even though they're in the organic spectrum, they are toxic to bees. And so having something that we can turn to that is not toxic to bees.
Right.
So you can use those other choices, like spinosad in particular. You can use those on plants that aren't blooming. So if you have problems with, cabbage loopers or whatever, problems with that, you can spray that on things that don't bloom. But then when you're trying to take care of something on a blooming plant where you're likely to have bee traffic, this is the place to go.
Now, when we were talking earlier, you brought up a really interesting point about aphids.
Right.
And when we've got aphids all over our Asclepias and butterfly weeds, milkweeds,
yes.
Obviously we're not going to want to use any type of control.
Right.
So you brought up a really interesting point about them.
Yeah, a lot of insects are actually a symptom of a stress signal from that plant. And in the case of aphids, who are kind of low on the food chain in the insect world, that's really the case. They respond to plants that have low nutrient content, meaning the sugars, actually, the carbohydrates in the plant sap. So if you can get that up, they stop feeding. So again, you're not using a pesticide. It's not killing them.
Right.
But it is discouraging them from feeding. So one of the reasons that I've always believed that your garden is so resilient is the fact that you have this total system, our 1, 2, 3 system of a healthy soil that supports all the microbes that we need for healthy plants. The fertilizer that is a slow release fertilizer, so we don't push those flushes of growth that don't have a chance to translocate nutrients. All of those things working together. And so if you add to that a foliar feeding, and it can be there's many choices in foliar feeding. It can be simple as liquid seaweed. Right. If you'll add the foliar feeding, it raises that plant sap nutrient content very quickly. Right. And it will discourage the aphids from feeding. You'll literally see, aphids feeding one day, and then you'll spray, and then after a 2 or 3 day period of time, you'll see the dead carcasses of the aphids that have they left, but the feeding aphids will have gone. Right. So if you have a plant that's covered with aphids, and we know the milkweeds have that problem, you need to spray about twice a week until you get control, and then after that you can switch to bi-monthly in the vegetable garden and monthly in your ornamental garden.
Perfect. Well, that's another one of nobody ever believes me is we've never sprayed these gardens for
Right.
insect or disease. And one of my favorite controls, especially with spider mites, is to just simply cut the plant back, dispose of the damaged material, and feed with the Arborgate
Right.
Food Complete and top dress with some compost.
Yeah, the plant has grown, it's gotten a little weaker, it's
Right.
been attacked. Go ahead and get rid of that problem. Then give it all of the tools that it needs to be able to flush healthier new growth.
Because you will not repair damaged
No,
foliage.
it doesn't come back.
It
You
doesn't
can spray
come
till
back.
you're blue in the face. The damaged leaves are not coming back. And the other thing too is, you have to always ask yourself during your walk throughs your garden and assessing things is, does this problem, I see the insect, I'm aware of its presence, but does this problem really justify my intervention?
Right.
And on things like this year, different years, a particular insect can be a big problem. And
Right.
this year we know that we had a lot of leaf miners on pepper plants and in that family of nightshades. And they don't really do significant damage to the plant. So we don't like the fact that we see the little trails on our leaves, but they're not really going to hurt your production. So when you see those leaves that there's an active leaf miner, you can pick those off. We want to put them in a baggie so that we don't loose them into our
Right.
gardens. Zip it up and toss them away, but there's really no reason to reach for a spray.
Yeah.
You can't reach the insect inside the leaf anyway.
Right. So don't panic.
Right, don't panic.
I love
It's just not
Felder's
worth it.
philosophy. Take your glasses off, step back a few feet, and the damage disappears.
That's true.
Yeah, and another thing to look for too is you may see damage, but it might be old damage.
It can be, and you need to examine for that
Right.
too. If you see damage, but you make an inspection and the pest is not present,
Yeah.
then all you're doing is wasting time and money. And upsetting the balance in your garden
Right.
as well, taking a risk with your beneficials. So you really do have to always ask yourself, is this problem worth intervention? And if it is worth intervention, then start through the organic process
Right.
of, the lowest toxicity first and then moving. But it's not ever a one solution fits all.
Right.
It is a spectrum, but it does start with healthy plants in the first place.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Angela. So, no need to panic.
No need to panic. They're just bugs.